Welcome to the intriguing journey of the Is This Really It multi-series. Join me, Valentino Goldberg, as we embark on a quest to decipher the ultimate transition of life, dive deep into the fascinating true accounts of near-death experiences. Do we transform into energy post-mortem? Keep your curiosity on its toes and stay tuned.
Glad to see you too, my friend. Well, today we're going to talk about your near-death experience. So, what happened?
Towards the end of medical school, in my third or fourth year, I came to visit home, came back home to my parents' home. So I came back home to Maryland, where I grew up, and I was at my parents' house, and I was in my bedroom reading some book, something about philosophy actually, which I was often reading. I was always interested in these topics. And something caught my interest, and I've kind of focused on it. I narrowed my interest, or narrowed my kind of focus. And in that moment, it is something like dynamite went off. As if somebody had put a match to a stick of dynamite and it just, boom. And, the room fell away, the body fell away. And the only experience was something I would describe as sitting in the sun, which is the only way that seems to make sense. It was something like an orange, saffron, brilliant blaze. It was brilliance. And it was like that was the only thing that existed. And the sense of identity, the sense of what it is that I am, was merged with that. There was a timelessness to it. It seems like, as I experience it again, as I'm telling you, it seems like it can go on forever. It seems like it is going on forever. There's a timelessness to it. Like it seems like it actually didn't start at some point and is not going to end or doesn't have to end. And at some point came this feeling of wanting to go forward, or that feeling that everything that I had ever kind of wanted, or anything that I had angst about, anything that I had this, I used to have this kind of restlessness, or this, I always wanted to know more. I felt like it wasn't enough, and medical school wasn't satisfying it, and regular school wasn't satisfying it, and even spirituality and philosophy as it is wasn't satisfying it. It was getting somewhere, but it wasn't sad. And I realized, okay, this is what it was. And then as the experience continued, there was a sense that, okay, it's almost like passing through a gateway. And there was the sense that if I continued, I wasn't really doing anything, but for whatever it's worth, if I continued doing whatever it is I was doing, being here, then it would all be done forever. There would be no going back. And at the same time, I knew this is everything I had ever wanted in a sense, maybe not completely, but in a sense, it was the answer, so to speak. And so that part of me, I guess, couldn't, it was like magnetized. It wasn't a voluntary thought. I wasn't like trying to do something, but it was just, I was being drawn forth. And just as it was going past the point of no return, just then, almost like you're going to take a step and go into the ocean, but just before you go into the ocean from the beach, then there was a flame that came up. Within this brilliant, infinite orange blaze, there was, I don't know, a blaze, another blaze, or a flame that appeared, or I say, conveyed the feeling that this wouldn't be fair, and that there were still things to do. That even though this was it, even though this was what that restlessness was about, even though, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, everything, still there is something more to do, and it wouldn't be fair, essentially. So on perceiving that, there was a truth in that I felt. It felt like it was still up to me, but it didn't feel right to then. So it's almost like you're about to do something and then you say, let me pause. Just pause for a second. And that pause is all it took. Like what it feels like to me is when I paused, everything that was remaining to be done, like a rubber band, shot back and yanked me back. And I went, whoosh, and then everything back. The room is back, the body is back, and everything is kind of back the way it was, almost like catapulted back by what it was that was remaining to do. And I say in the same breath, I say everything was like as I left it, so to speak, and at the same time everything was totally different. It was like freedom. It was like you're actually seeing for the first time. You're actually, not intellectually, but directly, intimately, viscerally, experientially, like what this is, what this world is, what this body is, what this lifetime is, this kind of thing. You get the nature of things, so to speak. It's not that all the details are there, but you get the nature of things, and you understand like what it is that we are trying to understand through science, and through astronomy and biology and chemistry and all of these ologies. What is it that we're trying to study, and what spirituality is trying to get at through practices, and where the apparent conflicts are. One of the things that became clear is that there are no contradictions, that all contradictions are apparent contradictions from certain vantage points of knowledge and understanding. I'm just going to take a moment here. Do you want to start asking, or do you want me to keep going?
Well, let me ask you something. Do you think it was that a Kundalini awakening, or maybe I'm wrong about it? It seems like a Kundalini awakening to me.
Yeah, it sounds like it probably is that. It is that that energy that is stored as the body, near the body, in the body, that is released. Yes.
Now, you mentioned past lives. Now, do you ever have any glimpses of your past life experiences?
I do. I have. Yes, I have. I think I probably won't talk too much about some of those, but yes, I can tell you some things where, especially the things that were traumatic and that needed to be healed for me to do the work I'm doing now. Those things especially came to light, and also some of the nature of the work that I'm doing, some of those things too.
Now, when we met, you described that you've seen these lights around you. Do you see them right now?
Yeah, so the way I would describe that is that I feel that what we call space, and things of course, but even space, is actually made out of light. That space is not an emptiness, which we know, even scientifically, we know that there's energy. We say there's energy that fills all of space, but I think it's more than that. I think space itself is an energy. It's not that there's something called space that is full of energy, but energy is space. And that from a deeper perspective, if you see my two hands, there's no fundamental difference between the hand and the space that's here. But in our culture, in our world culture, in our educational culture, we say, well, the hand is, of course, it's matter, or it's something solid. The space, I mean, it's the distance between. It's a different, either it's empty, or we'll say it's a kind of energy that's totally different than the hand. But I would say no, that the hand and the space are made of the exact same thing. And it's actually a habit of perception that makes us give accent or give importance to the hand and not the space in between. In art, I know you're also an artist and photographer, negative space, right? So we say this is positive space where you have something, and in between it's negative space where you have nothing. So the artist knows this is actually important. So they give it a name. It's negative space and positive space, both space. So the artistic mind recognizes that the space is as important as the thing. And that comes from this deeper recognition that both space and the thing and the matter are made from the same thing. And we can say in a sense that that is light. And I don't mean the reflected light that we see. You can see my hand because of reflected light, right? But there's the original light that is unreflected. And that original light is that which constitutes, we can say, the so-called physical world and the so-called mental world. It's one and the same.
Yeah, we are so mesmerized by our environment that we cannot get a concept that everything is light and energy, everything vibrates.
Yes.
Because if you go into the really, really powerful microscope, let's say you put this microphone in the microscope, you're going to see there is no solid. It's
Yes.
all space between each molecule, each atom, everything moves, everything is in movement.
Yes.
And then we see, okay, everything is energy, it's nothing solid here.
Yes.
But because we see it with our, with our eyes here every day, we can't understand that.
Yes, and even beyond the level of molecules, molecules are made from atoms, atoms are made from subatomic particles are made from elementary particles, which are supposed to be the smallest bits. And generally we stop asking questions there in medical science and generally in public. But if you ask what elementary particles are made of, they are local patterns, local vibrations of a non-local field of energy. So the smallest things are not made from smaller things. The small things are actually parts of infinite fields of energy, right? So it is energy to begin with. And the way you relate that to a broader worldview is that those fields of energy that physics talks about, like the Higgs field or the electron field, electromagnetic field, these fields are basically partial mathematical experimental representations of a broader consciousness, of a broader mind, like the second mind, which we talk about.
Yeah, I don't know. I might be wrong, but I have a concept that, let's say you go into we have a concept of big universe. It's all bigger, bigger, and bigger. But if you go into the smallest side, it goes like this, and there's another universe over there, the smallest one.
Yeah.
Let's say you go into this molecule, and it's infinite.
Yeah.
It's infinite universe. So now we don't have this concept.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a kid, I said, I don't know, I was like 5, 6 years old. I was talking to somebody, said about God. And I said, we can't understand God with our minds because our minds are finite. God is infinite. We see everything as finite. And I was a little kid when I was making those assumptions, but you got to understand, I grew up in Soviet Union. There was no God back in Soviet Union. It was atheism. But for some reason, I was thinking about it back then. Now, let me ask you this. How your life changed after this experience?
So immediately afterwards, I remember I remember sitting in the chair. I was still sitting in a chair, and I was looking at the body sitting in the chair.
Oh, you were looking from?
Yeah, I was looking at the body. I mean, sometimes I was with the body, sometimes I was not with the body. It was both. But now, as I'm seeing it, I was looking at the body, and like I said, the main thing was that everything was constituted of light. Okay, it's almost like you say a house is made of bricks. Okay, space was made of bricks of light, of light, and so was the body, so was the room, the bookshelf, all of these things. I have to say, it's beautiful. It's so beautiful. I think truth and beauty are the same. Okay, and when you have been told stories your whole life by all kinds of people who are usually well-meaning, but don't really maybe understand some things or get some things. I think for children, it creates a disharmony, right? Because you have to live by certain stories, but it goes against perhaps, or it's not quite fitting with what is most true, right? It's like trying to, you have a triangle shaped hole and another triangle, but one triangle, the angle is a little off. It doesn't fit. It just doesn't seem right. And so when what is true shines through, there's just this deep, deep, deep peace and rest. And it's finally like, it all makes sense. It all fits. There actually is no contradiction. There actually is no, something like this. So this was the initial feeling, and also of wonder, of beauty. And then I got up. I don't think I really knew what I was doing, maybe, or maybe I wanted to see what was happening, something like that. And I went into
you were still on the other side when you got up. You were still
yeah. It's still, let's say the door is still open,
right?
And went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the guy in the mirror, right? Because it wasn't clear why, and it didn't seem wrong. I didn't say, there just was no recognition, almost like it's somebody else. But in retrospect, I realized that it's also because there was probably just no tension in that body, as opposed to before there was tension, and even if you can't totally detect it on a person's face, you can recognize tension deep within. And when that released, that non-recognition, that was probably one of the factors in that kind of non-recognition. So there was some time period where it was just me going from that bathroom and then back to the room, and I don't know, just kind of sitting there and not doing something. And then eventually, I went out of the room and started talking to the family and things like that again. And then probably went through really intense beginning of my residency training, where the door was kind of opening and closing, never totally closed, sometimes totally open, but never totally closed, and kind of going back and forth, almost like a breeze that's opening and closing that door. And that forced me to start to integrate this kind of traditional life with a broader life. And it forced me to develop my language in new ways, use language in new ways. It forced me to, look at health in new ways, to understand purpose in new ways, so many things. And so that began a process. I actually got married soon after that, started my training in emergency medicine soon after that. So then, hardly sleeping, working 36 hours in a row, and, these kinds of things. So all kinds of things were happening. And eventually it took about 10 years to really kind of stabilize in an integrated experience, or I would say integrating, because it's still happening. The integrating never ends, but at least to gain stability, learn how to walk again, learn a language, be able to express and talk to people, that all took time.
So basically learning again how to function in this realm realm. So now let me ask you this. How did your immediate family or friends or colleagues in the university, how they reacted to your changes? I mean, that was probably very noticeable.
I don't have much memory of that. I think generally I tended to be a quieter person in general, maybe not with some of my close friends, but this was also closer towards the end of medical school. So most of the schooling had finished, and there might have been a little bit of break, I think, and before the residency started. So I don't actually remember, to be honest. I don't remember reacting with other people or interacting with other people. The real challenge came when I started my training, because that's when you very much have to interact with people. And that was very difficult for me, that part, once I started my training, because especially in medicine, you have to get into a very narrow frame of mind to think about anatomy, physiology, pathophysiology, diagnosis from a particular lens. It's useful from a particular lens, but when the lens is much broader and when there's no practice in shifting that lens very easily, now it's much easier for me, but at that time it wasn't. It was very difficult to talk to people and to have them understand. So I was kind of pretending, I was just
pretending to be normal.
Yeah, I was pretending.
Now, when you were in that experience, did you notice any concept of time, or that was like infinity for you? How did you perceive that time over there, or there was no time at all?
So as it happened, as I was sitting in the sun, so to speak, there was no time. And since then, the idea of time or experience of time has shifted completely, right? So for the experience right now is kind of a timeless experience that I'm having right now as I'm talking to you here. Meaning it's almost as if, I know we believe in this space-time continuum of a world, right? Like, so for example, I'm in a room right now, you're in a room right now, and I know we're about 3.5 hours away from each other on the East Coast of the United States. So technically I could walk outside into my car, drive, stay on the phone with you on the video, and in 3.5 hours I could see you in person, right? And we both would agree on that. Most people would agree on that. But the actual experience right now is there's a light display, okay? And there's a body, and there's a body, and there's an appearance. And in that appearance, we categorize things. And we say, okay, there's space. There's a physical space. Then we invent something called a mental space where the mind is there. And then there's a virtual space where Sergey and Anoop are meeting. And you kind of create all, and then there's a physical continuity to the rest of the world. To me, that's all conceptual, even though it's totally inverted. People would say what I'm saying is totally conceptual and it's not the way it is. But the way I experience it is that this is a possibility and this is appearing. And as we navigate this, the so-called physical world structures itself in accordance with that. And so in that kind of experience, time is occurring with our actions. Like, in a sense, we are creating time rather than we are constricted by or going according to time.
Yeah, but nevertheless, right now we are in 2D, right? We see the vision and we hear each other. What is 1D?
I actually don't think so, Sergey. To me, it's depending on the level of perception, it is the depth of the dimensionality, right? So we could say this is infinite right now. There are infinite dimensions. And then depending on the faculties that we use, the perceptual mechanism that we use, are we looking primarily through the eyes? Are we hearing primarily through the ears? Or are we looking at the function that functions through the eyes and the function that functions through the ears and the function that functions through the thoughts, etc.? So depending on how we engage instruments and perception, that degree of dimensionality presents itself. So I wouldn't say this is 2D or 3D or 4D or whatever it is, but rather there are infinite possibilities, potentialities, dimensions here. And as we engage them accordingly, they are kind of make themselves available.
Keep watching for more enigmas in the passionately riveting Is This Really It? Multi-part series. Subscribe and activate the notification bell. Grab the chance to be the first one to uncover the hidden truths of the afterlife.